Yes. At least let's get a sense of
Madam Speaker, before I proceed, I just want to read on page 26 of the standing orders under Amendments 42. If a member wishes to vary the terms of a motion standing in his name, he may do so by giving an amended notice of motion, provided that such amendment does not, in the opinion of the Speaker, materially alter any principle embodied in the original motion or the scope thereof. Such amended notice of motion shall run from the time at which the original notice of the motion was given. I just want to say, Madam Speaker, that in my view, what we have here is a completely altered intent of a motion brought by the leader of the opposition, in which she simply asked that the House take note of the presentation by the Prime Minister, which was a public presentation once it became nationally televised to the nation at large. And the reason she brought this motion is that we on the opposition side were willing to look at everything the Prime Minister said, both in text and in the presentation that he made, the PowerPoint, and examine the matters that he spoke to the nation about, so that we can bring some reason to the political presentation that was made on January 6th and 7th, I believe, to the public by television. Instead, what we have here is that the Prime Minister will not defend himself. Secondly, he sends forth the member for Digo Martin Northeast to basically hijack the motion, which is what he has done. He spends a significant amount of time, 10 or 12 minutes, trying to pacify a quarrel between himself and the Prime Minister about the numbers. And then he proceeds as a virtual prevaricator at large to present a most vapid, repetitive contribution. Because the whole intent of his amendment, Madam Speaker, was to take the debate to where they are comfortable, which is what?
to blame.
Blame Kamla. Blame the UNC.
Blame the people.
Blame the People's Partnership government. Because 3.5 years later, after a wealth of promises, after saying they were ready, after talk for 4 budgets now, what we have in this country is a government of absolute and total non-performance, with nothing gained, thousands of people suffering because of their policies, and the end result is that we have the Minister of Finance come in here and behaving like Maduro himself. So I want to start with a quotation from his minister, from the Minister of Energy of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Somewhere around 2009, 2010, this is the Minister of Energy from Hansard. This Minister of Energy, he made a statement in 2017, somewhere around 2009, 2010. We, meaning the continuing government of the PNM, this time under previous Prime Minister Patrick Manning, dropped the ball because upstream investment did not match the rate of production. It is what we call in the E&P business walking up the down escalator, because the escalator is coming down and you are trying to walk down, so you have to make investment just to stay where you are. That is what natural decline does to you.
Madam Speaker, point of order, 48-1. Sit down. This has nothing to do with anything said by the Minister of Energy.
I believe the member referred to for Standing Order 48-1. Member for Caroni Central, I'll give you a very short opportunity to tie in what you're talking about to what is the subject of the debate. And the subject of the debate is a resolution on the Prime Minister's two-day presentation.
Madam Speaker, the Minister spent his time talking about energy.
A very short opportunity to tie it in. Either
Yes,
you use that time or you spend the time fighting with me. Please continue.
I'll tie in everything. I'll tie in everything, Madam Speaker. So you have to make investment just to stay where you are. That is what natural decline does to you. Wells decline naturally, and you just have to keep investing to find new reserves of oil and gas to keep your production stable. Otherwise, it will decline until it reaches the floor. Upstream investment dried up in 2009, 2010. That is why the incentives that we provided were necessary, because they sat down for almost a decade, the last government, and there was no additional drilling in Trinidad and Tobago, which is what prompted the President Norman Christie of BPTT to say, which the leader of the opposition mentioned, and I quote the same quote that she used: "The truth is, without the incentives that were provided, the investments would not have been made." That being said, at the time of the investment, there was an expectation that prices were going to be a lot higher than they ended up being. So in a way, the country benefited because the allowance could not be used by the companies when the price of oil came down. What he is saying here, Madam Speaker, is that they got the incentives and they proceeded to drill immediately, having been in a drilling hiatus for close to 8 years in Trinidad and Tobago. And as they were doing that, hoping to benefit from the write-offs because of the increasing price of oil, 2014 came, January 2015 came. The end result is that they had no profit. They had nothing to write off. They had nothing to write off, and that is why the leader of the opposition mentioned what he said about the brilliance. So he went on to add, so you could say it was a stroke of brilliance on the part of the country and the government, because it provided the incentive we needed to invest. But we kept our promise and invested. But then the benefit we were expecting in terms of a write-off against immediate revenue, we could not take because there was no revenue. So now, Madam Speaker, through you, I want to speak to the population at large, because this is a habitual behavior of this Minister of Finance. He has no respect whatsoever for the truth. The last occasion he came and quoted from Mein Kampf about the big lie. And he then proceeded theoretically to expound. And in essence, was basically making the point that I was telling untruths in this parliament. I will never have cause to say an untruth to the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Standing Order 48-1, I did not say anything about the member for Caroni Central with respect to that matter in my contribution.
I'm sure.
Not a word.
Okay, so member for Caroni Central, I take it that that is the backdrop for the point you're going to make now. So please, let's stick with this debate. Proceed.
I just wanted to share that with the general public so that they know that behind all the bluster, there is pure prevarication and fluff. You know, in 1969, Madam Speaker, there was a fellow called Lawrence Peter, and he wrote a book called The Peter Principle. And the Peter Principle was meant to be a satire, really, about how people move up in the system. And then eventually they reach to a point where they become not so incompetent, really, at the new level. What was intended to be a satire became an obvious truth, because in all organizations, people recognized that that in fact happened. People kept moving up the organizations and they reached a point of incompetence. And I want to say that there is no greater manifestation of government incompetence and the Peter Principle than in Trinidad and Tobago with the Rowley government of Trinidad.
Moses.
This is a country with several challenges. We have many problems that we've got to deal with in this country. And what we have is basically, we have seen in this country everything disappearing and going. We have nothing to show or to celebrate in 3.5 years, close to 4 years now, of this government. I think you would remember that we had a company called ArcelorMittal here. That is now gone, Madam Speaker. I think you know that we had a company called Petrotrin, which has now been remade into different manifestations of new companies. But in all of that, the refinery is now gone. I think you know that there was a project called Sandals mentioned in the Prime Minister's document here. That is now gone. That is not mentioned. I'll tell you the page.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I'll tell you the page. Sandals is on page 26. It's right there on page 26. Okay? And that is now gone. And now we have a situation in which the Venezuelan gas pipeline is now gone. 2016 is gone, 2017 is gone, 2018 is gone, 2019 is going. And no one can identify any positive destination ahead for this country. Foreign exchange is going, investment is going. The leader of the opposition talked about that. Graduates with education and skills are going. Economic Advisory Board gone. Council for Competitiveness and Innovation gone. Ease of doing business going. Jobs gone and going every day. Credibility of the government of Trinidad and Tobago gone. International reputation of Trinidad and Tobago going, and going fast. What, Madam Speaker, is the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the members on the other side, the Prime Minister and the members of the government, what are they going to leave us with when they finish with Trinidad and Tobago? How many years will it take to rescue this country when they are finished with it? I think that is a question we should be asking. I don't think we should be asking the question that the member for Diego Martin Northeast is asking. Because what the people did on September the 7th, 2015, was to give them the opportunity to show their motion as the government of Trinidad and Tobago. They have had 3.5 years now. Now, we had the presentation of the Prime Minister, and in that presentation, he made reference to a number of things. And basically, he said 4 things that the Minister of Finance dealt with here today in his particular presentation. He said he talked about the NGC and what happened with the NGC. He talked about the $29 billion, which he said basically was squandered, wasted by the government at the time, that's to say the People's Partnership government. He talked about the debt in the election year, which was short-term debt, which were increased, which were refinanced as debt, longer-term debt by their government. And those are some of the issues that he mentioned here. But he didn't mention that on the 16th of September 2015, the Minister of Finance took $493 million from NGC. That on the 29th of October 2015, together with the IPO proceeds, he got $1,514 million. He did not mention that on the 27th of November 2015, he got $175 million. That on the 27th of November 2015, he got another $500 million. That on the 11th of December 2015, he got $501 million. And that on the 29th of December 2015, $501 million, which totaled $3.684 billion of funds taken by the Minister of Finance between September and December of that single year that they were talking about. Now, the Prime Minister talked about the $29 billion that was wasted, and he seemed to suggest that it was stolen, and that if the government had $29 billion, they would do this with it and that with it and so on. He talked about the central bank overdraft. He talked about all of these issues. And the Minister of Finance came here today again to reinforce those issues. I want to mention a few things here. He tried to compare Nigeria and Trinidad and Tobago. It is not the same thing. You don't even know how much oil you are talking about in the case of Nigeria. You can't just draw a piece of thing and without knowing what the foundation is, what the numbers are. Not revenue is not revenue. Revenue is not revenue in that sense. You can't just say revenue here, things that do not compare, like mangoes and oranges. You know, I mean, really. And, you know, the central bank overdraft, he's talking about it now. On the last occasion, I asked the Minister of Finance, up to now he has not answered what is the current overdraft for this government of Trinidad and Tobago. He has not mentioned that to this House. He has not come and given the information what it is. He answers no questions. He comes here to accuse. He comes to chastise. He answers no questions. So the issue of accountability remains a big issue for this government. The issue of transparency remains an issue for this government. And I looked at this document. I just want to mention a couple of things here from the document, that's to say the Prime Minister's presentation, which raise some issues really about what is going to happen to this country. You know, so on the issue, I wonder if I can find it here now. I can't find it here now, Madam Speaker. I'll get back to it. And the reason I can't find it, but I know it's there because I did the calculation, and when I used the calculation for the housing, based on the Prime Minister's own numbers here, it would turn out to be $2 million for a single house. And that is one of the things I wanted to question, you see, because he kept talking about these numbers just like that, 1 million here and 1 million there and 1 million, and when, sorry, 1 billion here, 1 billion there. And when I say, well, let me check this, I simply do a rough calculation, and it turned out to be $2 million a house. And that could not be right. Something has to be wrong. I think it was 300 houses he mentioned, and then he had the number. And so it is with this entire presentation, in which there are a lot of holes, a lot of political propaganda, a lot of misinformation by the way that the manner is the information is presented. So I want to underscore this issue. If we did not give incentives, we would have no gas today, none of the juniper, all the energy growth that he's talking about. They did nothing for growth in this country. They inherit that from the last government. Every other sector in this country is in decline. I give him the numbers today. He said he had it. You know what he did, what he does? He comes here, he comes with the review of the economy. The review of the economy is put here in September 2018. And it covers the numbers for 2017. Okay? So he brings the review of the economy for 2018 in September. It covers the numbers for 2017. The second thing that they do in that review of the economy, which is dissected in the monetary report of November 2018, is that they took all the petrochemical manufacturing institutions in this country that are producing revenue, and they put it in the manufacturing sector. All right? So the end result is that the numbers have really given a false impression of what is happening in the economy. But when you come, and that, Madam Speaker, I want to emphasize is based on 2017 numbers. When you come to the November monetary report, what happens there is that you are going to June of 2018. So the numbers, and the governor of the central bank, careful not to contradict his minister, but knowing that he must be an independent being as governor of the central bank, he takes the information and he dissects it in such a way that you distinguish between the real manufacturing sector and the energy resources that are adding to growth in the energy sector. So I want to say something here which is important. Now, the government has been harping on the collapse of revenue from the energy sector from 2015 to 16. The Prime Minister used energy taxes only to make his point when he addressed the nation. Why did he not use overall energy revenue? The EITI report for 2016 says energy revenue in 2015 was 21 billion, and in 2016 it was 8.86 billion, Madam Speaker. That is a far cry from $1 billion. And this is a fall of 58%. Okay? But it's just that the Prime Minister was playing politics, and it was more politic for him to talk about energy taxes. Now, what was the main reason for the fall in revenue in 2015 and 16? It was the fall in oil prices, the fall in natural gas prices, the fall in methanol prices, in ammonia prices. That was not something isolated to TT. It was happening in every country, every energy country in the world. And as I said, the accelerated capital allowances, and I'm reinforcing the point made by the leader of the opposition, although they existed and they proved to be good incentives, they were not used by the oil companies. Now, the Minister of Finance, he knows this very well, you know. Everything that I'm saying here, he knows. He knows the issue about the review of the economy and what it represents. He knows the issue of the manufacturing sector and incorporating the energy sector, manufacturing, and what that means. He knows the difference between the monetary report and the review of the economy. So whenever he comes here and he distorts the information, it is absolutely and totally deliberate. Yes, he's absolutely deliberate. You know, and I want to say, you know, when the leader of the opposition was speaking, she was talking about the things we delivered, and they were touting, well, what did you deliver? I'll just mention a few things we delivered. We delivered the Diego Martin Highway. We delivered the state-of-the-art health facility in Karanaj. We delivered the boardwalk for public enjoyment in Chagaramas, deteriorating now. You going to talk to me about that and corruption?
Don't be distracted, member. Don't be distracted.
Yes. The Five Islands entertainment facility, which people are using now, private sector investment. The scores of projects in East Port of Spain, small projects. The Cuba Hospital. The sporting complex next to Atto Boldon Stadium.
What a beauty.
Courts put up their regional headquarters in central Trinidad, private investment. Unicoma. C3 Mall facility with Movie Town complex in South Trinidad. The Mitsubishi project in Labre, which is going to come on stream in this particular year, Madam Speaker. We created 56,000 jobs in this country. All of them have flitted away now.
Lost the work.
And I asked them, what have you done? What have you produced? How have the people of Trinidad and Tobago benefited? And all of the projects over which they have presided have been mired by lack of transparency and lack of enlightened governance practices. In the ArcelorMittal project, yes, it was a private sector company, but they tried to meet with the government.
And the minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Before we close, I was talking about some of the governance failures in the economy by this government during their current tenure of office, issues touched upon in the presentation of the Prime Minister when he was giving his presentation. But before I do that, I want to mention two things that I did not address, which the Minister of Finance raised. And that is when he talked, you know, he plays the role, it would seem to me, of the statistics police in this parliament. So he talked about $36.1 billion and an average of nearly $7 billion annually that we took from the NGC. You know what he was doing, Deputy Speaker, and it took me some time to figure it out, because he came so fast and loose with it that I couldn't understand what he was talking about. What he did was he took the dividends and he added it to the corporation tax. I mean, as a corporation, they must pay tax. And then he put that as if somebody raided the NGC treasury. I mean, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is not right for a Minister of Finance to do these kinds of things. And, well, I mentioned the other thing of the energy revenue, which was over $8 billion. And the revenue must fall by a significant amount if the price of oil and the price of gas fell so dramatically beginning in June, July, and then really dramatically in January 2015, and then continuing into 2016 when it went quite low. And the other thing that I want to mention is that, you know, he talked, you know, disparagingly about the leader of the opposition using the reserves at the central bank and adding them to the HSF and coming up with a number of monies, cash in the bank, so to speak. But that is exactly the phrase that the Prime Minister uses on page 36 of his presentation. Cash in the bank, and then he has foreign reserves, he has HSF, and then he has the withdrawal amount. So, you know, the Minister of Finance, I would say, tries to confuse more than anything, tries to basically create doubt and cast aspersions on the opposition every time we say anything that has merit in it. So but I was talking about the governance issues in the economy. You know, when ArcelorMittal had that crisis, the company leaders came here, the private sector leaders came here to talk to the government, but nobody in the government would talk with them. They would not engage them at all. The minister refused to talk to them. They said it was a private sector business. But in the end, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you know what happened? 644 people lost their jobs. And we haven't heard anything about them since, in terms of the government's making any effort to do anything for them in their situation. And then in the Petrotrin issue, whatever you might think of what the situation was with the refinery and what might have had to be done, I think everybody was horrified in this country about the manner in which the government proceeded with the Petrotrin matter. And the end result was that they alienated not just all the workers who were affected, and it doesn't matter what benefits they got thereafter. It was the way they treated the matter. But people all over this country felt that a government should have a little more sensitivity in dealing with matters like this that involve the jobs, the livelihoods, the families, the communities in which they live, of thousands of workers. And we're talking here about upwards of 5,000 workers. And when you think of the ripple effect and the connectivities, really much more significant than that. But you know what was very interesting in the Petrotrin matter that the Prime Minister raises here, and he spends from pages 41 to 46 on it. He goes through the entire Petrotrin matter. He even talks about monies that Petrotrin owed to the Treasury because of dividends and so on. But he never, and he had a picture of a man carrying the debt on his back in a knapsack. But in all of that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, he never once mentioned the Malcolm Jones board and that they created the debt. And he continued to treat the debt as if it was something that we had created, that our government, the People's Partnership in our time, had created. And nothing is further from the truth. That is a debt that came to this government, to our government, and you would have heard the leader of the opposition talk about how much we had paid towards that debt. And the Prime Minister never mentioned at all what that debt involved and how it came into being. And it gave the impression that we were culprits in the matter. The Prime Minister talks about sandals on page 26.
Yes.
And
Remind the member for
huh? It's right here. We got the transcript.
Address the chair. Address the chair. Address the chair.
On page 26, he talks about sandals. I won't go into it. And I could give you my transcript if you want it. All right. Well, that's fine. That's fine. So we have sandals issue. I wouldn't say much about the sandals issue. I think everybody knows that the real concern there was the environmental issues, the concessions issues, and the fact there are other issues as well. Basically, the most important issue was that people were not clear on what was going to happen, who was going to do what, how it was going to happen, what at the end of the day it would mean for the country, what at the end of the day it would mean for Tobago, what at the end of the day it would mean for taxpayers, and at the end of the day what it would mean for sandals. And it is that lack of transparency, which is a governance issue. It's not an economic issue. It becomes an economic issue only when it turns out to be bad governance. And in all of these issues, we had bad governance. And then the final thing was the Venezuelan pipeline, which is 21 to 22 on the text that I have, which is a transcript of the presentation of the Prime Minister. And I also have the presentation, that's to say the visuals that he used. But in that particular thing, the Venezuelan pipeline, we are in a situation because of the foreign policy position of this government and their fixation with the tie-in of the pipeline to the Maduro regime. We are now in an awful position with regard to that. And should there be regime change in Venezuela,
there will be.
As it seems inevitable at this point, this government will not be able to have any discussion whatsoever with the new government. So the mismanagement that I want to raise is the mismanagement of the governance issue, because you see the matter also came up in the Mitsubishi issue, in which they renegotiated the terms and conditions of that, and that also could have ended up in a disaster. But it was saved. We have the benefit of the investment now, and that investment will begin to bear fruit around April or May, I think, of this year. And so I raised those issues. I raised the Petrotrin issues. I want to get back now to the issue of the numbers of the Minister of Finance. You see, on the last occasion when we were in this house, and the Minister of Finance accused me of constructing a big lie strategy. I simply responded very short. I said I'll be very short. I will just like to say to the population at large that I am sure the member for Diego Martin Northeast, the Minister of Finance, is aware that there's a publication called the Monetary Policy Report of the Central Bank, November 2018, and that he should have a good read in order to find out where the country is at this time. And I spent a few minutes explaining the difference between this report and what it covers, and the difference and between this and the review of the economy, which covers the year prior. Okay? And before I go on to that, though, I just want to say with regard to the central bank overdraft of $9 billion that he talked about, that the Minister of Finance, our Minister of Finance at the time, who was out of office when we lost the election, actually went to him and told him this, that there were quarterly, I was not there, but I know when he came to see you.
Please, Minister of Finance, please. Silence, members. Minister of Finance, please, and proceed.
He told the Minister of Finance quarterly year-end payments from the oil companies, $6.5 billion. Funds from the NGL IPO, $1.5 billion. TGU funding, $3.5 billion. $500 million in dividends from NGC, and he told him about the FCB loan of $1 billion just in case they needed it. When you add up that, that comes up to over $13 billion, which I think is a little more than $9 billion. So he had all the money. He had everything coming through. All he had to do was to manage as the Minister of Finance. There's government continuity. You have the same authority. You know how to deal with it, and he could have done it. But he did not do it, and you cannot blame the last government for putting everything in place to solve a problem, and you not executing the solution to the problem and blame the last government because you failed. So I want to get to the monetary report. And I start here on page 2 of the monetary report. And I read, second paragraph, the still sluggish overall economic climate has resulted in less favorable labor market conditions. While the official employment statistics for 2018 are yet to be published, data from the Central Statistical Office point to an increase in the unemployment rate of 4.4% in the fourth quarter of 2017 from 3.6% in the corresponding period in 2016. The number of persons with jobs fell by approximately 12,000, and about 7,600 persons opted to leave the labor force. So here is it that the central bank governor is telling you that within a 6-month period, basically, that basically we are losing jobs, and he identifies here 12 and 7.
Remember, you have 2 more minutes.
How much?
2 more minutes.
2 more minutes? All right, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's very hard for me to proceed with anything of substance here, but I will make the general points at this point.
Time is very visible. Eh?
Yes,
Right,
I
okay,
know that.
fine, yeah.
I know that. I'm not blaming you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm just sort of speaking aloud, so to speak. So I was just surprised this time went so quick. But what we have here, when you take the monetary report and you put the first 6 months of 2017 and the first 6 months of 2018, and you put them together in comparison to 2016, you find that the non-energy sector as a whole declined by 5.8%, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So things are not good in the economy outside of energy. And he made a big thing about the fact that I said the economy was contracting. I did say that we have growth in the energy sector because of decisions we made in 2011, 2014, and we are happy for that. But nothing is happening elsewhere, and that is why the decline is there. Construction declined by, using the same comparison, 11.24%. Manufacturing, and he does dissect the manufacturing here, by 11.18%. Distribution by 8.8%. And what we have is really a situation in which nothing is happening in any other part of the economy except the energy and more particularly gas, because we have a downward plunge in production in oil as well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, something that the country doesn't fully know as yet. But we have a situation where the country, in my view, is in grave danger because the capacity for recovery becomes harder and harder with each passing year. If that is the end of it, thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
I recognize the member for Port of Spring North, St. Anne's West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Allow me just to start with the first amount of fact-finding or fact-correcting that I have to do during the course of my contribution this afternoon. My friend for Tewarie Central started off his contribution by drawing our attention to a specific standing order. And of course, as is becoming the norm now, misquoted and tried to mislead. I don't think intentionally. I think he may have been sent that way by others. But I'd just like to put on the record that the motion that was moved by my colleague, the member for Diego Martin Northeast, was completely within the standing orders, and in particular, Standing Order 42, sub 3, which says any member may propose that a motion be amended by A, deleting words, B, deleting words in order to substitute other words, or C, inserting or adding words. So there is absolutely no issue or impropriety with what was done by the member for Diego Martin Northeast. And that is how my friend for Tewarie Central began his contribution. The next point I'd like to make is just to correct, because there are a number of persons, I assume, members of the public, Mr. Deputy Speaker, looking on at the contributions here this afternoon. And I was hearing throughout reference to the Honorable Prime Minister, and the member for Diego Martin West said this, and in his presentation on page X and page Y. The presentation, and there is only one presentation, which is the slide presentation done by the Prime Minister in his address to the nation, which was a slightly different format that seems to have a lot of people in a tizzy